So, what if everything you thought you knew about productivity is, well, wrong? We're always told it's about having this perfect desk and these long 2-hour focus blocks. But what if real productivity is actually born from chaos, from near death experiences, even, and from a deep, deep fear of regret? That's the wild idea at the heart of Matthew Dick's amazing book, Someday is Today. So let's dive in because we're about to uncover a totally different way to get things done. This quote. Man, this is really the heart of the whole thing. After a truly awful car crash, this was Matthew Dick's only thought. It wasn't fear, it wasn't sadness, it was just regret. That experience, and a few others like it, forced him to build a life that was specifically designed to get rid of that feeling. And that's really what we're digging into here. How do you live a life without all those what-ifs? All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with that big idea, the specter of regret. Then we'll get into some brilliant, super practical tips about time, place, and planning. And we'll wrap it all up by connecting it to your deeper why, which kind of reframes what productivity is even for in the first place. So, how does a brush with death change what's important? Well, for Dix, it wasn't about some magic light bulb moment. It was about this gut punch realization that our time here is finite. And the real enemy isn't being lazy, it's regret. So every single strategy we're about to talk about is basically a weapon in that fight. Okay, first things first, we're going to take a sledgehammer to some of the biggest myths about getting stuff done. This is all about dropping that need for perfect conditions and just learning to embrace the beautiful mess of real life. The first huge idea is something Dix calls the parking lot practice. And I've got to tell you, this one really changed how I think about creative work because it's built on a simple, kind of powerful truth. Real productivity, it's not pretty. So look at this contrast here. We see these perfect pictures of productivity all over social media, right? You've got the quiet coffee shop, the perfect latte art. But the reality, the way Dix tells it, is so much grittier. He talks about being early for a dentist appointment, and instead of just scrolling on his phone, he pulled out his laptop right there in the parking lot and wrote part of his novel. That's what it's about. It's about making progress down in the trenches, right in the middle of all the chaos. And that idea of finding time in these weird, unexpected places flows right into our second tip, the minutes mindset. You know, we're so used to thinking about our days in big hour-long chunks. But when we do that, we let an incredible amount of time just disappear. Let me ask you something. What could you really get done in just 7 minutes? I mean, it doesn't sound like much, does it? You're probably thinking nothing meaningful anyway. Well, this next little story might just change your mind. Get this. This is what Dix actually said to a colleague who showed up 7 minutes late for a breakfast meeting. While she was apologizing, he literally showed her these sentences he had just written for his book in the time he was waiting. 7 minutes. Can you imagine compounding that over weeks and months and years? Those little pockets of wasted time, they're everything. All right, so we've totally rethought where and when we can work. Now, let's talk about how we actually tackle those huge, overwhelming projects when life is, well, life, fundamentally unpredictable. This is where tip number 3 comes in, and it's called the lily pad method. So instead of seeing a big project as this straight line you have to follow from A to B to C, Dix wants you to picture a pond full of lily pads. Each little lily pad is a tiny task. And here's the kicker. You don't have to hop across them in order. You just jump to whichever one feels the easiest or most inspiring right now. Someone actually asked Dix this exact question, and his answer was a big, emphatic no. If you feel like writing chapter 15 today, then go write chapter 15. The whole point is to just keep moving, to keep creating. You can always connect the dots later. Just start on whatever lily pad you can actually land on today. So if the lily pads are your day-to-day tasks, what's the big destination you're hopping towards? Well, that brings us to tip number 4, the horizon habit. See, unlike those super rigid SMART goals, a horizon goal is more like a general direction, a point on the horizon you're just always moving toward. So instead of saying, I will become a famous rock guitarist, your horizon goal might just be a musician. That opens up so many different paths. You could become a producer, a teacher, a songwriter. It gives you this amazing flexibility and resilience. And that leads perfectly into tip number 5, and honestly, one of my favorite quotes from the whole book, the piano precedent. The point isn't that planning is bad. You absolutely need a direction, a horizon. But life happens. Trying to meticulously plan out every single step for the next 5 years is basically just asking for fate to completely mess you up. The key is to have a direction, but always be ready to navigate the chaos. Okay, so we've covered some awesome practical strategies. But now we get to what I think is the most important part. Why are we even doing any of this stuff? These last couple of tips are what connect the how of productivity with that much bigger question of why. This leads to a seriously powerful tool for making decisions. Tip number 6, the 100-year-old plan. It's simple. The next time you're stuck between two choices, one that feels urgent and one that feels important, just ask yourself this one question. What would the 100-year-old version of you say you should do? Dix tells this beautiful story. He's at his desk, he's on a deadline, and his son comes in and asks him to play tag. Now, the urgent voice in his head is screaming, "Stay and work." But he stops and consults his 100-year-old self, who knows that one day his son won't ask anymore. And that version of himself will always tell him to go play. This one question just cuts through all the noise and gets right to what really matters. And that brings us right to the final piece of this puzzle. Tip number 7, soft goals. See, productivity isn't really about maximizing your economic output. It's about creating the time and the space for the things that actually bring you meaning and fulfillment, even if they don't look productive to anybody else. These are your soft goals. So let's bring this all home. The goal of all of these unconventional tips, it isn't just to hustle more or check more things off a list. It's really just a means to an end. And that end is a life that's full of intentional, meaningful experiences. A life that is, hopefully, free of regret. I absolutely love this quote. Dix was coaching a client, and her soft goal was to watch the 50 greatest movies ever made. And he told her, the entire point of optimizing your work is so you can get your ass on the couch and do that. Your productivity should be in service of your joy. And that's really the final question I want to leave you with. All this effort to be more efficient, more productive, for what? What is that deeply personal, maybe even unproductive-looking thing that you're working towards? What's your version of the couch and the black and white movie? Because that, right there, is the real reason any of this actually matters.